All right, thank you so much, guys. All right, let's go back to you.
Thank you so much, Go. Wow. I just really love his music, he will play some more later. So yeah. So again, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. It's a very, very important event for really everyone, but it's really important event for me because as my bio says always, I'm a graduate of a high school in Hiroshima, where 350 students lost their young lives on August 6, 1945. So this cause is very, very dear to my heart. So I really appreciate everyone coming here today because you could be doing something else this night, but you just chose to be here to celebrate life right now and also honor the lives lost and everyone who's been affected. And I'll talk more about that later. But right now, I would like to bring out a person who I really dearly respect, Tina Orduno Calderon. She is an elder of Gabrielno Tongva, Chumash, and Ioma descent. Tina is a singer who also enjoys creative writing and composing poems and songs. Additionally, Tina is a cultural bearer, traditional dancer, and storyteller who strongly believes in honoring her ancestors by sharing their history, educating others about indigenous truth, and inspiring others to respect the lands, water, sacred elements, and environment. So Tina, thank you so much for being here. Tina's always been supportive of this event. She offered prayers twice in the past, and I really am grateful that she's here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Takuro. And thank you, Go, for that amazing music. Beautiful. So as we gather today with love in our hearts, compassion in our souls, and justice on our minds, let us pray for the people, the elements, and all the life affected by the actions of nuclear destruction. Let us pray for the ones who lost their earthly walk and for the families and communities who mourn for them still. We ask Creator to guide us in our actions, to safeguard the generations to come. We ask Creator to soften the hearts of the nation's leaders who put greed and destruction in place of respect and reciprocity. Let us remember that uranium that is used for those destructive ways, it actually has a purpose, and its purpose is to warm the earth. And when it's carelessly extracted from our Earth Mother, oftentimes in our tribal territories, we harm the lands, we poison the waters, we hurt the people, the animals, and the plant relatives in the process. Let us be mindful that good stewards of the lands, they do not cause harm to our relatives, and that we should all be striving to be better stewards and to do good in this world. As we remember the sad events at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and as we pray for healing, I offer this Tongva traveling song. Weya, 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 ahasak weya ure, morir como cre, yamone te hofko po ami, eyo shun shun mo choha. Weya, 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 ahasak weya ure. Morir como cree, yamoneme, tehofko po ami, eyo shun shun mo choha. Weya, 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 ahasak weya hure. We sing our traveling songs when people leave this realm. And this song says, we mourn, we're sad, but we say our goodbyes and we ask that they go well because our hearts, piece of our heart goes with them. So in closing and in gratitude, I thank you for inviting me to share my prayer. And I ask for blessings for each and every one of you, for your communities, for your loved ones. Te hofko po ami, may you go well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tina. I just have to say that every time that you pray for us, I don't know, it just clears the space. And I think when you played for the first time in our event, it's just like I understood the meaning of prayer, purpose of the prayer for the first time in my life. So thank you so much. So I would like to say a few words before we move on to our event, the continuing portion of our event. So today, I see myself as a host, which is, so it's my main purpose here is to welcome you guys and create the space for us to come together. Because for one, it is important to remember what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and also not only that, but also everyone in the world who's been affected by this nuclear chain and nuclear ambitions of very few people. So it's important to remember the indigenous people of this land who have been affected by nuclear testing and also uranium mining, and not only Native people, but everyone who's being affected nuclear testing. I can't really name. I don't think I can name all of them, but and also like nuclear waste dumping as well. That's currently happening. They are talking about building facilities in New Mexico and Texas, which should be stopped. And everyone who's been affected by nuclear accidents. So yeah, remember them. That's very important, but also building power together. That's the title of this event. And I see that very important because for one, I feel very, very worried about the state of the world today. So to me, this event this year was call to action and all hands on deck, because we need to prevent another nuclear war from happening. And I think we can do it. We can do this together. So I welcome, many people have asked me about how to donate money to me or my group. And I actually don't have, nonprofit status. So it's kind of hard for me to accept donations. But today, this year, I thought, every single organization the speakers associated with today is a wonderful organization, and they are doing wonderful work. They are doing actual work, which is very hard to do. So, speakers, I welcome you to drop your contact information, your donation information in the chat. And please, if you're participating in this event, and if you feel like donating to these organizations, please do so. And that's how we build power together. So thank you so much. Oh, okay. So I have to mention our endosas. I'm sorry, I was gonna forget. So PANA, Progressive Asian Network for Action, actually the Fukushima Support Committee, the predecessor of this organization, was born out of PANA. So thank you, PANA. And ICUJP, Interfaith Communities United for Justice and Peace. Thank you so much. Code Pink, Answer LA, Harriet Tubman Center for Social Justice, Veterans for Peace, Council for Pacific Asian Theology, Friends of Chain Reaction. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to move our program into Michael Lindley.
Oh, there we go. I'm sorry. I'm hard of hearing right now. I lost my hearing. Things I want to talk a little bit about, and I'm not going to be too long because I can't hear very well. That's the U.S., Russia, France, UK, India, Pakistan, North Korea, and Israel. These countries all have nuclear weapons. We need to focus on these countries, put the pressure on them. And actually, I think we should boycott these countries because until they get rid of their nuclear weapons. Another thing we need to focus on that we don't use nuclear weapons at all. Our country, we need to get our missiles decommissioned, and the use of in this country of use of nuclear weapons. One other thing I want to talk about a little bit about is nuclear energy, wind and solar. I don't know if anybody's been following it, but Scotland has just launched a turbine. It's off the coast of Scotland. It works on wave action. It produces quite a bit of power, and it's under the water. You can't see it. I think that we need to explore that more, try to get that involved, get our country involved in programs like that. But most of all, we need to get these weapons decommissioned. We need to get them out of our hair, and we also need to talk with Saudi Arabia. We need to urge the Biden administration to talk with Saudi Arabia, drop the sanctions on them. They don't need those. They could probably help. It'd probably help quite a bit. So anyway, I want to thank. First, I want to say, Sukru, you're awesome. I've enjoyed always working with you, and a lot of the people that I see on the screen. Thanks again. I would like to talk longer, but I can hardly hear myself. And I want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Michael. I mean, Michael's like so humble because I was gonna say he is a chapter president of Veterans for Peace, the organization I belong to also. And Arlington West, which had been prior to pandemic, had been at the Santa Monica Pier for 15 years, every Sunday. And he really was a pillar of the project. So thank you so much for your dedication, Michael. I really admire you and I love you. Thank you. So I'd like to move to prayer by Reverend Peter Hatta, another supporter of our event. Reverend Peter Hatta has been to our event and prayed for us so many times, and we really appreciate your support. He's at the Higashi Honganji Buddhist Temple, another very well-respected, religious institution in Little Tokyo. So thank you so much, Peter Hatta.
Thank you very much, Sakuro, and thank you very much for getting us all together. And I've enjoyed this program so far, and I'm really honored to be a part of it. Let me first begin by offering incense on behalf of everyone. Namo Tabbas. So on this, very significant and solemn occasion, but also maybe hopeful occasion, I would like to chant a Buddhist kada, or invocation, that's entitled Zensho Mida. This invocation is traditionally chanted by priests before our funerals and memorial services. And in just 4 lines, it expresses our trust in the Buddha's wisdom, in the Buddha's teaching, and our wish that this universal truth be received by all of us in this gathering. So I think, as you can tell by the title, it's chanted in Japanese, and its most important line is the 4th line, I think, which says in Japanese, Jubu Jouke Rai Niu E. And in English, this says, the Buddha, riding on a lotus flower, comes to enter here and witness this service. So I think, as many of you know, the lotus is a very important symbol in Buddhism. And just as the beautiful lotus flower, responding to the powerful light of the sun, grows out of the mud at the bottom of the pond, in the same way, the light of the Buddha's wisdom allows us to see our mud, the limitations of the ego self within, and thus awaken to the preciousness and interconnectedness of all life. I think this is the wish for all of humanity that's expressed in Zensho Mida. So I will begin Zensho Mida now. Zensho Mida Niu Dojo O Fu Fui Igu Fugan Oji Iko Kanon Seishi Jiunja Ashu Jubu Jouke Thank you very much. And once again, thank you to Sakuro and to everyone for participating in this very wonderful event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Peter Hatta. Yeah, 2 years ago when we had in-person event, Peter Hatta, very generously brought us the whole, ceremony, and we all lined up to offer incense And that was just really very important moment for me. So kind of sad that we can't do that, but I think we experienced that in our spirit today. So thank you so much. So now I am bringing out a very special guest this evening. So when this event was switched to online event, I thought of inviting a guest from out of town because one incident this year was very important to me, which was discovering a connection, nuclear connection between Hiroshima and the city of San Francisco. Both cities are very dear to my heart because they nurtured me in my youth. So we have here Dr. Ahimsa Porter Samchai, and she is a principal investigator and medical director for Hunters Point Community Bio Monitoring Program, Health and Environment Sciences editor for San Francisco Bayview newspaper, former elected member of Hunters Point Shipyard Restoration Advisory Board, and a founder of Radiological Subcommittee. Thank you so much, Dr. Ahimsa, for joining us.
Thank you so very, very much. And I am deeply honored to be here. This is the place that I wanted to be most this evening. And I am also humbled to follow that very, very powerful presentation. I think for the first time got a sense of, the on the ground, experience of, being the worst, mass casualty in human history. Let me say also that I'm African-American. I have and am blessed to have a lot of Asian influences in my life. My paternal grandfather's second wife, Martha, was Japanese, and I admired her very much. My maternal uncle fought in the Korean War and brought his wife Kimi home, and I have cute cousins with really curly hair, and my former husband spent time in Thailand. And a good friend of mine, Janice Mirkatani, who is the poet laureate in San Francisco, an activist and someone who was highly revered, recently passed, and I'd like to dedicate my comments to her. I'm going to talk with you just briefly about some of the scientific and advanced biomedical technologies that are being applied in evaluating people who have been exposed to ionizing radiation. And I, in addition to all the long titles that I was honored to receive, grew up in Southeast San Francisco, and my father was a longshore walking boss at the Hunters Point shipyard, and he's one of the reasons why I'm here. He died. His cause of death was pulmonary asbestosis. I'm the doctor on his, his death certificate, and his death brought me into a journey of understanding environmental health, environmental justice impacts. Another really important mind-blowing experience in my life as a young doctor. I worked at the Palo Alto Veterans Administration in 1997, and I was in charge of the Persian Gulf Agent Orange Ionizing Radiation Registry. And I interviewed what were called the atomic vets. They were the veterans who had been exposed in South Pacific in Operation Crossroads the year after the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The United States Navy went back and exploded detonations. One of them was underground, and those ships were hauled back to the Hunters Point shipyard. But I had an opportunity, to talk to some of those vets, and it was utterly mind-blowing. I just found it very, very difficult to even believe, you know, the histories that they were conveying. But later on in the year 2000, I got involved in environmental health and justice issues in Southeast San Francisco, in the city that I, you know, grew up in the neighborhood I grew up in. And as a result of that involvement, I came to know a lot about the history of the shipyard. It has a checkered history. It has its moments of glory. President Theodore Roosevelt had his Great White Fleet docked there in 1908 on the first limb of their journey around the world. And it was on the afternoon of July 15th, 1945, where U.S. Naval Captain Charles McVeigh writes in his diary that, quote unquote, they put upon us what we now know to be the atom bomb. Captain McVeigh arrived via the USS Indianapolis on a Sunday about 12 noon. He writes, to an evacuated shipyard, which he thought was odd. And he was met by a group of naval personnel, including a medical doctor, and they were carrying a canister. It was 10 feet long, and they took the canister on board and they bolted it onto the ship. And then they sailed on to the South Pacific. And the rest, you know, a tragic history on August the 6th. The bomb, a little boy, was dropped on Hiroshima. There were 66,000 people killed. I know you guys know that more than I do, but I, you know, just again researched the incredible impact of this act. And only 20,000 of the people who were killed were military personnel. So the remainder, you know, as you depicted poetically, were civilians. And, you know, that is certainly by all definitions war, a crime that has never been fully adjudicated. But the work that we're doing right now at the Hunters Point Shipyard is looking at people and workers in the neighborhood surrounding the base, where in addition to this naval history and this role in history that is absolutely enormous, it also by the next year had come to house the U.S. Naval Radiological Defense Laboratories. This was the premier research laboratory in the United States for studying radiation and nuclear effects. It was the only research laboratory. It attracted the best and the brightest, and they were throwing radioactive spaghetti on the walls. It was anything goes. The Atomic Energy Commission was embryonic. It had no teeth. So, you know, they were pouring effluents of radioactive waste into the drains, you know, burying irradiated animal carcasses in landfills, you know, on the shoreline, and feeding human volunteers radioactive potassium to see what effects it would have on the muscle mass. I mean, some of this stuff is just absolutely incredible. And I came to know about it because of the work that I did at the VA, and as a result of the information that I got as a member of the Hunters Point Shipyard Restoration Advisory Board. But, you know, we've long suspected that the disease spectrums that you see in the neighborhood, which look like patterns of disease that people have when they're exposed to environmental toxins, was a result of shipyard and related industries. But in 2019, we were able to launch a human biomonitoring program, and the findings have been absolutely stupendous, astronomical, more than I ever expected we would find. We have people with, you know, aggregates of carcinogenic and radioactive heavy metals in their urine, like more than one. You know, we have 2 women with breast cancer. Both of them have cesium in elevated levels. You know, one of them has strontium and both of them have thallium. And we recently had a screening that continues to blow my mind. And it relates to the comments, I believe, that Tina made earlier in Navajo women and infants who've been exposed to uranium in areas where uranium mining took place. There is evidence that even after the uranium mining stopped, these infants had body burdens of uranium that were so enormous it was hard to explain. And we had a situation that explains it. We screened a woman who had lived and worked actually in the 3 high-risk areas around the base. And we documented and mapped where she lived. We screened her urine and she had uranium levels that were 2 times higher than toxic. You know, okay, so that I think that should impress you. And then we screened her 12-year-old son who had developmental delays. He was underweight. He had environmental allergies and food allergies and, you know, just a lot of problems. And his uranium levels were 5 times higher than toxic. So the only way that we can explain a little boy having that high a body burden, over twice the body burden of his mother, is if it was through bioaccumulation from intrauterine exposure and breastfeeding. She breastfed him for a year. So, you know, that just kind of gives you a picture of, you know, what we're capable of with, you know, the biomonitoring. And again, the research on Navajo women and infants also shows that by about 10 months, there's evidence of developmental delays and there's failure to thrive. You know, these are changes that are irreversible. So let me just finish up. Thank you for your patience. I just have a couple of quick maps and they're easy to understand. In one of the maps, we screened people living and working near the shipyard. This is an aerial view. And these are 6 radioactive elements that are being detected: uranium, cesium, gadolinium, thallium, rubidium, and strontium. And as you can see, you know, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. The cluster is around the entry of the shipyard, and it's radiation contaminated shoreline, that E2E area. This is where those landfills and where that campus of the Naval Radiological Defense Institute is housed, and where they were pouring the radiation into the drains and burning it in power plants over the base. And then remember this pattern. The next slide, and then I'll conclude, is a slide that is a cluster of cancers that the atomic bomb registries identifies as being linked to ionizing radiation exposure, and they include the things that you know: breast cancer, thyroid cancer. This is a mapping of where people live who have been diagnosed with cancers conclusively linked by your registries to ionizing radiation exposure. And there are a couple of things that should jump out to you. The clusters look similar. The people who have radiation in their urine and the people who have cancer seem to be clustered together. And that clustering of the 2 maps suggests a cause and effect relationship. So, you know, this is some of the work that we're doing, and this is the work of the future. Biomarkers is considered to be an expanding area of scientific research. But let me just close on a spiritual level by thanking you, you know, for the opportunity to be here and to share this incredible experience that you survived and are so resilient in commemorating. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ahimsa. Yeah, so I was pretty struck to find out the relationship, the nuclear connection between San Francisco and Hiroshima, and actually, above anything, what shocked me was that I lived there in San Francisco, about like 20 minutes drive from Hunters Point, but I never knew about this.
Yes.
And I think it's because, you know, how they separate us. All I heard when I lived in San Francisco about Hunters Point was, oh, it's a Black neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I felt in retrospect, that's how they separate us. That's how they take, you know, our humanity away from us. And I think the only way we restore our humanity is to come together and fight for each other. So thank you so much, Dr. Ahimsa.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. So now I'm introducing another activist that I deeply admire, John Parker. He's the coordinator of the Harriet Tubman Center for Social Justice and an anti-war and anti-imperialist activist who has traveled on peace delegations with former US Attorney General Ramsey Clark to many of the targets of US imperialist wars, including Cuba, Iraq, Iran, Syria, and Palestine. Thank you, John.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first I want to thank you. This year, this date has an even greater impact on me since I was in Japan last year and visited the Hiroshima Museum, where you really get an appreciation of how this affected children. And we've been told by the powers that be and the institutions of the ruling class here in the United States that this horror was a necessity to end the war or to save lives, meaning those people were expendable for the more important people, the US soldiers. From the admissions of former President Eisenhower to statements from General Curtis LeMay saying, quote, the atomic bomb had nothing to do with the end of the war at all, we know that this is not true. So why is it taught to us ad nauseum? And maybe more importantly, why do the powers that be think that this justifies dropping a bomb of this nature on two cities with the intention of killing every human being, a majority civilian, including children? And why do they think that society will not be abhorred by their admission to committing one of the most violent war crimes committed by a military against civilians in history? How could anyone justify that at least 200,000 people, including thousands of children who were killed by the atom bombs dropped on Hiroshima on August 16, 1945, and Nagasaki 3 days later? Even decades later, people died from radiation-caused illnesses, and its effects are still felt. But maybe the answer can be found in how they justify other acts against non-European peoples, like, for example, the pandemic of racist police murders against Black and brown people in the United States. Somehow it's promoted that those people are not as worthy of their lives as white people or US soldiers representing the interests of the ruling class. Another parallel experience, by far just a microcosm of what happened in 1945, but when trying to explain the true nature of one thing, it helps to point out the similarities and connections of things close to home. And for people living in the United States, especially those who live here in Los Angeles, this incident happening a few weeks ago fits the bill. I live in South Central Los Angeles, and about 3 weeks ago, many of us here were shaken by a thunderous boom that sounded like we were also being bombed from the sky. It was an explosion set off by the LAPD, the Los Angeles Police Department. They decided to explode an enormous amount of the confiscated fireworks that they had gotten from some home right there in a residential neighborhood, ignoring safety protocols and destroying some homes and injuring residents. Now, where did the LAPD decide to be so reckless? Not in a rich white neighborhood, but in a predominantly Latinx neighborhood in South Central. And this was during the day while people were in their homes and walking in the neighborhoods. Basically, it shows that racism is a tool used to deny the humanity of peoples. And many times it's the Black and brown communities that face the initial and more acute attacks against our class first before they are generalized to the rest of the working class, which is why solidarity is so essential, especially from those who are not the immediate victims of imperialist aggression, whether it be an international or domestic aggression, like the bombing that took place here by the LAPD. And the treatment of those injured here afterwards also parallels the treatment of the victims of other attacks by US imperialism. A denial and a refusal to address the immediate and long-term needs resulting from their violence. The residents here were not given even the minimal necessary needs of healthcare, housing, or clothing, or food that was required, given their homes and their lives were disrupted. That wasn't until there was a fight to demand them by a community organization here. We hear more about the slanders against Cuba than we do about the attacks on working people, especially Black and brown working people here, that occur on a daily basis. A daily diet of police murder and terror in our communities, a daily diet of intimidation and lack of essential health care, especially now during the COVID crisis, where working people, disproportionately workers of color, are forced to work under dangerous conditions with little protection from the contagion. And like the needs not being met by my neighbors here in South Central, the money that could be used for them and for the countless victims and their families in Hiroshima and Nagasaki are denied. Instead, the US government is squandering the wealth created by working people for the needs of the rich and corporations over the need to heal or fund other basic necessities of life for the majority, like healthcare, education, housing, or to fight climate change. More than 100,000 workers were mobilized by the US Army's Manhattan Project to build the death bombs. At least $2 billion was spent, which as a percentage of the US economy today, it's about $180 billion. Today, Biden's military budget for 2022 tops $715 billion, and it provides another example of the US imperialist war policy and its roots in both parties of the ruling class, both Democratic and Republican parties, carrying out a consistent policy of the executing and planning of future war crimes. The police terror meeting our Black and brown communities serves a purpose, and that is to keep down the inevitable fight back against that oppression in our struggle for justice and self-determination. And that's what the imperialist nuclear policy has always been about, to deny our international working class their right to build society based on social justice that puts the needs of the people before the needs of profit, and to deny the self-determination of our working class here and those most acutely affected by the effects of racism, which is a tool to weaken our united strength. At least 4 million Koreans were killed during the Korean War using napalm and white phosphorus bombs on human flesh. It didn't satisfy the US generals and politicians. The then Texas Congressperson Lloyd Benson demanded that atom bombs be dropped on Koreans. Yet he was still the Democratic candidate for vice president in 1988 and served as President Bill Clinton's first Treasury Secretary. Korea also remembers the Hiroshima Holocaust, since about 30,000 of its people were forced to work in Japan when the bomb was dropped. The imperialist threat of nuclear war is constant, and this is what fuels the desire of other countries to obtain nuclear capability to stop that threat. So stopping the US imperialist nuclear threat is essential and primary in the fight to free the world of all nuclear weapons. Climate change can no longer be ignored if we want to survive. And we must realize that this insane and evil war crime against humanity we are commemorating today must be exposed for what it truly is, a threat to our existence that continues to this day by a ruling class of imperialist bankers and monopoly industrialists who will stop at nothing to destroy the aspirations of our working class for social justice, even if it means destroying themselves in the process, as long as they can turn a profit. But thanks to people like the people on this webinar, our class is resilient and will be victorious. As long as we see each other's struggles, especially those struggles against racism and sexism and LGBTQ2S plus oppression as our own struggles, we must reject in no uncertain terms the racist excuses for murdering Black, brown, or indigenous, our immigrant, our migrant peoples by the police, our military, whether those atrocities occur in South Central Los Angeles, or Hiroshima, or Nagasaki. Thank you for the honor of participating in this essential forum on building peace.
Thank you so much, John. Wow. I was just reading a chat, power to the people. Thank you so much. And thank you also for mentioning the presence of Korean workers, Korean laborers in Japan at the time of the bombing. So in Hiroshima, by December 1945, 140,000 people died. But out of that 140,000 people, 30,000 estimated were Koreans. And in Nagasaki, 47,000 people died by the end, well, actually 74,000 people died by the end of the year. Out of 74,000 people, 10,000 estimated were Korean workers. So it's no small number. So I would like to acknowledge that as a Japanese. And yeah, thank you so much. So next I will bring up Lydia Ponce, another person I dearly admire and love. And she gave me a bio which says a relative. She's a loving relative. And I heard her speak at the anti-Asian hate rally the ANSA Coalition hosted this year. And the way that she firmly stands up for people's rights, but with such love, is just amazing. So thank you so much, Lydia, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for creating a community circle on a Zoom, and that's what it feels like. I'm Quechua Mayo descent. I am from this continent and another in Peru. I am actually also Scottish. I'm calling from the lands of Sagna, from the unceded territorial lands of Tongva. I am always every day grateful and thankful, and I pray and give those thanks to the ancestors and to the people for allowing me to continue to be clumsy on their land and still learning. What I wanted to talk about in a very heart-filled way is my experience as a woman, as a mother, as a grandmother, and the way that I worked within LAUSD. It's an honor to have Arlene today here because she inspired me to continue the work to talk about things as the military and to be offering informative and useful resources and updated resources for families as a parent coordinator at Venice High School. And I had been known to be called into the principal's office at my age because I ran off the military off the campus. So, with that, I want you to trust me with your trust. And if you know more than I, that's please share with me. I don't have statistics. I don't have numbers remembered, but I do have a sense of stories of humanity and how the Los Angeles Unified School District has whittled down the experience of a parent who can make guiding and informed and really educated decisions for their students by way of not returning phone calls, not returning emails, and being off-puttish to the students. And specifically speaking about the military, we've had to opt out our students of the military, and that requires every parent filling out a form that used to be in the parent handbook printed. Now it's online. And if you want your child to not be harassed, harangued, or pulled out of class during the day, if you have a high school student in your family, in your neighborhood, or within your, as an auntie or uncle, grandpa, grandma, or a son or daughter, you really need to think about the informed decision and how you want to present this information, because the application to opt out of being bothered by the military and being harassed is because of the no child left behind. And if you don't opt out, the military will come up to the campus at the high schools and extract the information of your home address, your phone, and your email, and will speak to your child without your consent. And so as many times as I've been called into the principal's office, it was worth it. It doesn't take a lot to inform parents and students that there are other options, because we have to be honest that every student isn't college bound or university bound. We still need certificated educational options plumbers, mechanics, head start teachers, nurses. We need a community built with the infrastructure of what they're calling now the essential workers. And I would rather know that I did my best to try to inform community to make a better informed and decision about these things. Now, if they lean towards being, enlisting into the military, then I celebrate that decision too with them, because that's a personal decision. It's not a me decision. And with that, I have personally gone with parents to pull the students back and away from the recruiter. They changed their minds and they were signing contracts under the age of 18, and of course, without parent consent. These recruiters are operating on a completely different heart, a completely different mindset, and the heart is not even involved. It's gonna be that, it was a hard thing to do, and I'm encouraging you to think about these things, because we wouldn't have A-bombs if we didn't have such a thing as war. And all of these atrocities of war bring about terroricide, ecocide, and of course genocide. And mostly Black and Indigenous, our Latinx, all of our students that go to these wars frontline are fodders for these wars. And it comes back, they come back changed. They come back forever changed. And there's very little people statistically who have graduated from any kind of university paid for by the military, let alone finding jobs. Things have gotten better because the veterans are, empowered to stand up for themselves, and we support our veterans for going on our behalf and putting their lives on the line. However, when they come back, we need to receive them with love. We need to receive them as relatives. And there was another discussion on another call about doing that at the end of this month, in receiving relatives returning from war. So I'm just going to say that if there's any takeaways from what I learned and what I experienced straight from the heart, is you can be that relative. You can be that person to help people opt out. I will drop a link for the Facebook page that I provide. The deadlines are from the beginning of the first day of school all the way to November 1st. Those are hard deadlines to have any high school student opt out. And it doesn't mean that they shouldn't or couldn't join. It just means that we're providing the empowerment for parents and families and students to make their own informed decision. The second thing is that it has to be online, and it is in Spanish. It is in all the languages. I think there's like 82 languages in Los Angeles that are spoken. None of it is in Nahuatl or any other indigenous language, but you can help anyone with English as a second language, any community member who needs that kind of support. They do translate to all the other languages, and that beautiful tapestry of culture that Los Angeles is. And the last thing is that if you need somebody to help you, dedicate some time and some information in regards to some of the certificated options, I'm going to say there's LA Trade Tech, any of the schools, any of the adult schools offer wonderful options online as well because of COVID, and that we have to somehow, I'll close with this, we have to somehow be vulnerable with each other to a certain point where we have to trust each other with our trust, because that is such a beautiful gift that weaves our truths together to make a healthy and healing community, a forever continuous healing community. And that if our truths collide and are in conflict, that we should always be able to call each other up or communicate, at a safe distance in person if we can. And if not, just give a quick phone call or text, because I am a firm believer that we have to be the ones that master agreeing to disagree, and how we're going to come together and continue to be community, that we basically are connected and we're related, more related than we are in disagreement. And thank you for your time. And let's continue to pray for water and pray for the land and pray for our critter relatives. And Tina, it's beautiful to spend time with you in the Zoom. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the presenters. Thank you for all the speakers. Many, many prayers and continued blessings for a beautiful and healthy life.
Thank you so much, Lydia. Thank you so much for building power together, because that's, what this feels like. So next speaker, wow, I have like the best speaker lineup this year. So another dear friend of mine, John Prisner, thank you so much for being here. He is a Korean peace activist and organizer with Answer Coalition, which stands for Act Now to Stop War and End Racism. Thank you so much, John.
Hey, thank you. Yeah. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today for this commemoration, and to everyone who helped make it possible and for allowing me to say a few words. It's so important on this anniversary that we remember and honor those lost and affected by nuclear weapons and their loved ones. And I want to offer my deepest personal condolences and those on behalf of the Answer Coalition. I also want to speak, as Sakura and others have said, on the need to struggle for those victims today. The fact that nuclear weapons exist at all is an abomination. If humanity is to survive, we must abolish nuclear weapons, and soon. In addition to the countless lives already lost or harmed from nuclear waste, nuclear testing, nuclear accidents, the existence of nuclear weapons themselves means that we are always minutes away from enough firepower to end human existence, sent on missiles that cannot be called back or deactivated once they are fired. And they are fired by a very small number of people. And let me be clear that it is the United States that is the primary danger here, with the largest and most advanced system of nuclear weapons, including an array of stealth aircraft and the 18 nuclear-armed Trident submarines, which can be deployed undetected to hit anywhere on Earth. Each Trident submarine alone carries 24 sea-launched nuclear missiles, with each missile carrying 8 warheads. So that means of each of those 192 warheads in total on one Trident submarine, of those, every warhead is larger than the ones dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So not only is this enough to destroy hundreds of millions of people with just the initial blast, but studies show that even just 100 Hiroshima-sized detonations today would cause catastrophic nuclear winter, killing hundreds of millions more just from famine. Any strike like this would no doubt be accompanied by or responded to by other nuclear launches. This is just one craft. Not only does this pose an existential danger because of the possibility of these hair-trigger military protocols going off because of an accident or a misreading, of which there have been numerous nuclear war close calls in history, where nuclear weapons were armed and deployed in response to false signals on incoming enemy nukes, or launch orders were given and then not followed. But the US has shown time and again, and even openly expressed to this day, that it is actually willing to start a nuclear war deliberately, just like it was the only country to have ever used nuclear weapons in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which again, as others have said, was a completely unnecessary act of racist terrorism against the people of Japan. The Japanese Empire was already defeated, and the bombing was also a warning shot from the US to liberation movements around the world, showing what the US was capable of doing. Not to mention that it is also documented that the firebombing of Japan, which killed 100,000 people, had left only a few cities untouched, including Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because the US wanted to test their new nuclear technology. Later during the Cold War with the Soviet bloc, Daniel Ellsberg, the well-known high-level Pentagon whistleblower who continues to be outspoken, revealed that the US had plans for a first strike attack that would quote-unquote win the war. The plan was to, without warning, nuke every city in the Soviet Union and China. When Ellsberg learned of this plan, he was horrified, and I'll read a few of his words here. He asked, if these plans are carried out, how many people will die in the Soviet Union and China? And the answer was in the form of a chart, which showed that they anticipated that in the first several months of the fallout, there would be 275 million dead within weeks, 325 million in the Soviet Union and China alone in the first few months. I then asked how many altogether elsewhere, and the answer was 600 million. Neutral countries would essentially be wiped out by the fallout without a single warhead of ours landing in their territory. And that's without considering a Soviet response to this, either on us or on Western Europe. 600 million people, 100 holocausts, end quote. This was the US plan during the height of the Cold War. And today, the big picture of US nuclear strategy hasn't changed much at all. A core principle of US military doctrine is what is known as an offset strategy, meaning that the US is always racing to keep an overwhelming military and technological edge over its declared enemies. This includes the ability to win, quote unquote, a nuclear war by destroying enemy nuclear weapons before they can be launched in retaliation. This includes the newly and openly expressed desire and plan to dominate space with the Space Force in order to have the ultimate high ground from which to dominate the planet below. The US can do this because it retains a large economic and military advantage ever since it emerged from World War II as the dominant world empire, which was made possible because the US was the only industrialized country whose mainland did not experience heavy bombing during World War II. For these reasons, it is really the United States that is driving this current nuclear arms race. The Biden administration, from a big picture military perspective, has taken the reins from Trump almost seamlessly, who himself took over from the Obama administration's so-called pivot to Asia. The US empire is reorienting away from being bogged down in conquest in the Middle East towards so-called major power confrontation with China and Russia. This is openly expressed by the Pentagon. The US military is actually preparing with all of its logistics and contingencies and budgeting to go to war with Russia and China. And while the scope of such a conflict may seem unfathomable today, it also seemed unfathomable to people before World War I and World War II, both which broke out because of unpredictable, dynamic, interconnected events that spiraled out of control. The same thing can happen today. And with the path the US is on, it is becoming increasingly likely. The US is constantly pushing the envelope with provocative deployments of aircraft and warships and so-called freedom of navigation maneuvers right off the coast of China, in addition to ramping up war propaganda and economic attacks. Really a by any means necessary approach to carry out regime change in or the breaking up of China with nuclear war as an option, to turn the Asia Pacific into a zone of conflict instead of a zone of cooperation, one that is much more easy to dominate. The US is also currently increasing the development of so-called non-strategic weapons, nuclear weapons, or small-scale nuclear weapons, which could be deployed with lower-level on-the-ground battlefield authorization. So the danger today cannot be overstated. I say all this to say that today is about honoring the lives lost and the people impacted by nuclear weapons. And I think the best way we can honor them is for people today to oppose this renewed US war drive and to get organized and to fight to make sure that what happened to the victims of nuclear weapons in the past doesn't happen to anyone else ever again. Because that type of change will not happen from inside the Pentagon or the White House or Congress. The generals all think they're going to be safe in a bunker somewhere when this happens. This kind of change will only happen because of the organized struggle of people like us. And those of us on this call who are in the United States, we have a special duty and opportunity to end what is happening from inside the belly of the beast, the US war machine. So please get in touch with any of the great organizations here today. Let's fight for peace and justice, which must include an abolition of nuclear weapons once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. You said it. I mean, he said, everything that I wanted to say. Yeah, let's, the best way, as he said, best way to honor, people who've lost their lives to nuclear atrocities is to act now towards nuclear abolition. So, please follow, any of the groups that's here, and let's organize. Thank you so much. So I must tell you, we will probably end around 8:10. I hope it's okay with everyone, and please stay till the end because great speakers, 3 more speakers are here. So Jerry Rubin is next speaker, and what can I say? I mean, Jerry to me, like, needs no introduction because he's like a legend, right? And he, to me, like, he embodies like peace and love. Yeah, he encouraged me so many times in the lowest point in my life, just with his Facebook posts. That's like how amazing he is. So he's a longtime peace, anti-nuclear, and environmental activist. In his 40 plus years of activism, Jerry has organized hundreds of educational forums and public demonstrations. He was a participant He's a participant and organizer on the 1986 Great Peace March for Global Nuclear Disarmament. Has peacefully demonstrated and been arrested at nuclear power and nuclear weapons sites. Has done over 40 peace and anti-nuke protest fasts, and is the founder of the Activist Support Circle, a support group for progressive activists that he began in 2005 and which will resume later this year. Thank you, Jerry.
All right. Well, thank you, Tsukuru. And greetings to all of you wonderful activists on this special day. You see the shirt that me and my wife Marissa are wearing here at our home in Santa Monica, California. This was given to us by our old friends that used to head up the Nuclear Free Zone Registry in the early 80s, Brian and Jean Mocha. And it says in different languages, let's make the world a nuclear free zone. I would like to share some personal story about why the anti-nuclear movement is so close to me and how I got involved. And I appreciated all the detailed information that we need to comprehend and work on, and the links we need to make about the dangers of nuclear power and nuclear weapons and the connections between the two. We need to oppose both. When I was a child, I had epileptic seizures in my home in Philadelphia. And I used to have tremendously bad seizures all day and all night. And at night, I'd hear these nightmares. And what I'd hear are the air raid sirens that they used to put on at noon every day in school and tell us to duck under the desks to guard against any nuclear attack, as if that would save anybody. And I remember it to this day, how horrible that was for me. Anyhow, I had a rough life. I was a high school dropout. I ended up after foster homes and youth detention homes, prisons. And then I came out to California to try to change things, but I got involved, unfortunately, in drugs and more crime. And after 18 hospitalizations and 5 suicide attempts later, I was lucky enough to get involved in the anti-nuclear movement, the peace movement, and the environmental movement with a group called the Alliance for Survival. And it's one of the best things that happened to me. I've been an activist for many, many years. My beautiful wife, Marissa, and I were married at a public peace rally wedding on the anniversary of the world's largest ever anti-nuclear demonstration. It took place on June 12th, 1982 in Central Park, New York. I was honored to be one of the 1 million people that was there protesting against nuclear weapons. And when I met Marissa, when I came back to Santa Monica, we decided to get married on the first anniversary of that day on June 12th. And the theme of our wedding was linking personal commitment and love with global commitment and peace. And that's our wedding ring, the peace and love symbol. In 1986, I was honored to be a participant and one of the helpers on the 1,000-person Great Peace March for Global Nuclear Disarmament that marched for 8.5 months from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. for global nuclear disarmament. And to this day, I can't help but think it was one of the most organized and disorganized, heartfelt, consciousness-raising events that ever took place. We had 50 children under the age of 15, and we had over 50 people over the age of 60. The oldest was a 79-year-old Rhodes scholar named Franklin Folsom that marched all the way across country with a cane. A few people died on the march, a few babies were born. We have annual reunions. We carried the Hiroshima peace flame and kept it lit the entire way. And I was honored when I flew back home from Washington, D.C. to bring the Hiroshima peace flame to the Buddhist temple where it is here in Los Angeles. And I'll always remember when we were at Kent State University in Ohio, and we were given a tour of the tragic graveyard site of the 4 students that were killed by the National Guard there, the Hillel students. We lit some candles there from the Hiroshima peace flame to make that connection. And I'll always remember on August 6th, we were in then President Ronald Reagan's hometown of Dixon, Illinois, and 1,000 people did a symbolic dying there. But I was surprised that most of the residents there agreed with us and thought that our cause was a good cause. And if I learned anything on that march cross country, it was that most people do. We're hearing false information. Most people know that nuclear weapons are a complete danger. They know that we need to help our environment for the future of our children. And so I hope that can give us some hope and understanding and the impetus to make sure we do everything we can to not fight so much amongst ourselves, to somehow come together because we have a responsibility to be diverse, to work together, the older people like us and the younger people. It's not us versus them. It's the best ideas, the new ideas of the younger generation, and the ones that are working still that some of the older generation might have thought of. So we have to be smart, we have to be unified, we have to maintain our diligence, and I'm sure we will. And we have to agree to disagree, but we have to make sure we do less fighting with each other, more organizing and building coalitions. So as far as the Save Chain Reaction Group, I just want to close by saying, in 2010, I read an article by a wonderful reporter then named Bob Poole, that this wonderful 26-foot tall peace sculpture that the late 3-time Pulitzer Prize winner, political cartoonist for the Los Angeles Times had created and built was being threatened to be removed by the city of Santa Monica. And I thought, wow, this is crazy. We had worked so hard to get it approved. I had met Paul Conrad back in 1990. He had gotten a $250,000 donation from the late Joan Kroc, who was involved with the McDonald's Foundation, who gave away billions of dollars to public television and public radio and so many good causes, including anti-nuclear causes. She helped with the Great Peace March, and she was investing $250,000 for Paul Conrad to build this controversial, unique, and yet important peace monument. And he inscribed at the base of it, and it's still standing because the community did save it. He inscribed it saying, "This is a statement of peace. May it never become an epitaph." And it's made of chains, and it looks like a mushroom cloud. And it might be scary, but it gives an opportunity for parents to talk with school children and them to talk amongst themselves about nuclear war and what it means. It's a wonderful educational and creative artistic piece. It's now a landmark. It was unanimously proclaimed a Santa Monica landmark. The community came together, famous artists, famous actors. Norman Lear donated $25,000. Veterans for Peace donated $1,000. Other people donated money. And we raised over $100,000. And the city saw the commitment of the people and the dedication. And the city manager then at the time said, "We will do everything to save this now. And we will put in any money it costs over and above that." And they created a sustainable garden, peace garden around the base now also. So if you're ever out at the Civic Center in Santa Monica and you get a chance to come by, we've held many Hiroshima and Nagasaki public events there. And I think that's when I first was honored to have met Tsuruku. And a lot of people spoke there, people from Veterans for Peace, the late Blaise Bonpane, who I'm sure we all know, and many, many other peace and anti-nuclear activists. So I just want to close and say thank you so much. This day, August 6th and August 9th, are always so special to me and so meaningful that I don't even know what to say. It's almost impossible to conceive of such an atrocity happening and how much we have to make up for that and make sure it never happens again. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry. What can I say? I mean, I love you. Next up, Marcy Winograd. I mean, another person who needs no introduction. In the meeting I was in, right before this event, we were talking about Marcy already without knowing that she'll be here. So yeah, Marcy Winograd is the coordinator for Code Pink Congress, a campaign to promote progressive foreign policy. She is also the co-chair of the foreign policy team for Progressive Democrats of America. In 2020, she served as a DNC delegate for Bernie Sanders. So thank you, Marcy.
Thank you so much, Sakura. Thank you, everyone on this call. I'm here with a lot of friends from never heard your story. It's incredible, and thank you for your leadership on this issue. And having worked with Lydia was a great honor, and Arlene and Michael and Mila, lots of people on this call I feel a great kinship with. And I'm just, I'm in awe of what has been laid out during this call, of what people have said about their own personal stories, and really a hard look at where we've been and where we're at today. And so I'm going to be relatively brief, but I wanted to make a few points, to elaborate, to add on to what John Preisner was saying about this this drive for nuclear rearmament. To put it in context, we have a treaty on the prohibition against nuclear weapons that went into effect this year, signed by over 80 countries, declaring nuclear weapons to be illegal. And I think we need to incorporate that into our conversations, whether they be with representatives or friends, because I find that there are a lot of people who still cling to this notion of US exceptionalism and the drive for full spectrum dominance of the sea, the land, the air, the space. And it's a very frightening juncture we're at. As John Preisner pointed out, legislation has passed in Congress. It just needs to be signed, I think, at this point. Well, some of it may not be passed by the House, but I don't have any doubts that it won't be. And that is the Eagle Act and the Innovation Act, pushed by Schumer and Meeks, that would authorize more missile sales to China, encircling of China, and declaring the defense of Taiwan as an urgent national priority. And as was mentioned, this is very frightening, given that Ellsberg recently, released these documents showing that the U.S. was prepared, or the Air Force was prepared to send nuclear bombs into China over Taiwan in 1958. I think it's very important that we inform people about this drive for nuclear rearmament within the United States. It's euphemistically called nuclear modernization, and I would just urge us to all avoid that term because it disguises the banality of what is happening, and it is not modernization. They're talking about creating, designing, developing a new warhead for the ground-based strategic deterrent, which is 600 nuclear silos, ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles that would replace the 400 in Utah, Wyoming, Montana, Nebraska, and Colorado. Underground silos with warheads that would be, I've read, anywhere from 20 to 100 times more powerful than the bomb the US dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the bombs. So very few people seem to even know about this. This is what's really frightening. And I guess that would be the question that I have to put to the group is, how do we get back to where we were in the 1980s with a nuclear freeze movement, a mass anti-nuclear movement, because we seem to have strayed so far from that. And while I applaud a lot of the movements that are focused on what's happening domestically, somehow we have to connect these struggles because yeah, I meet people. I went to the dentist the other day. My dentist said, oh, I feel like relieved. Biden is in the White House. We don't have to worry. And every day I just pray that we don't plunge ourselves into another war, not to mention all these horrific sanctions against countries that are invisible wars, but a nuclear war. And in reading some of the documents that were produced by under the Trump administration, it's really, it just takes your breath away. There was a whole, the Joint Chiefs issued, I believe it was in 2018, 2019, a document on nuclear operations that embrace this idea of nuclear integration. That's what they call it, where you use nuclear weapons in a conventional war where a decisive victory is not in the offing, and we need to push back very hard on this. President Biden is working, or his administration is working on a nuclear posture review, which is, a document, as many of us know, that's produced by each president as they come into office, that outlines their nuclear priorities. And I was reading the nuclear posture review under Trump, and it framed it as Russia, basically Russia is the enemy, and Russia's doing this and Russia's doing that. And so we have to develop these low yield nuclear weapons, which, as we know, blur the line between conventional and nuclear war and are much more likely to be used. So I would suggest that, we get our message out there about his new nuclear posture review and what we want to see in it, and that we challenge this nuclear rearmament program that, as was mentioned, was committed to under Obama. And from what I've read, it was a way of securing Republican votes for the START treaty. What a bargain that was, right? So then Trump funded it. Northrop Grumman got a sole source contract to build these new missiles in the upper Midwest. And now Biden is going forward with it. But as hard as it may be to believe, our Senate is to the right of Biden on this. I mean, he came forward with a record high military budget, $753 billion, right? 30 to 50 billion for the Department of Energy, which oversees nuclear weapons. And the Senate Armed Services Committee, which has, it's chaired by a Democrat, Jack Reed of Rhode Island, came out just recently and said, we want another 25 billion for the military. And now the Republicans are trying to slip in another 50 billion for the military with this infrastructure bill. So that's something that we have to really push back on. And I met Skura in front of Senator Feinstein's office. She chairs a subcommittee on appropriations that oversees the Department of Energy. She used to actually come out with op-eds saying that our nuclear weapons program is unnecessary and unsustainable, but she has gone quiet for whatever reason. So there needs to be, I mean, we need to be really visible in front of these offices out in the streets, and every day kind of wake up and say, how are we going to energize people to do this? You know, first, I guess we have to make them aware. I do want to mention there's a group called Tri-Valley Cares in Livermore, and Code Pink, we have a show called Code Pink Radio. I interviewed Maria Kelly, who is the executive director of Tri-Valley Cares. They filed a lawsuit along with other organizations, including the Guluyichi, I think it's I'm not sure if that's the correct pronunciation. It's off the island of South Carolina, where you know, they're going to produce these new warheads in South Carolina and in blanking out, I think Los Alamos. Anyway, it's a lawsuit against the federal government, specifically the Department of Energy, for not conducting appropriate what they call programmatic environmental assessments, looking at how this ramped up quadrupling of nuclear warhead production, they call it plutonium pit production, would impact surrounding communities, transportation, there's no place to put the waste and so forth. So they have filed this lawsuit, and currently at Code Pink, next week, we're going to be urging and sending out emails to constituents of Katie Porter's in Orange County and to Carolyn Maloney in New York, both of whom oversee oversight committees. They are chairs of subcommittees on oversight to hold hearings on this. You know, we don't approve plutonium pit production at all, but at least it might be a way, if we could shed some sunshine on this, some light as to what's happening, to galvanize people. Because, you know, frankly, I'm finding that a lot of people are unaware of the trajectory that we're on. So we have to tell people, we have to, you know, build this consciousness. And I really appreciate the title of your Zoom, you know, building solidarity, because can't do this alone. This is a huge lift. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcy. And I just want to tell everyone, and probably everyone knows this, but Code Pink, check out their website, because they have ongoing campaigns and they do actions. They have wonderful shows. It's just so much there. So, you know, you can participate in like something. You find something there, so check it out. Okay, so the last but not the least, Reverend Dixon Yagi has always been a supporter of our event and of actually our actions. So he is Okinawa born and educated in Hiro, Hawaii. He's the director of CPAT, which is Council for Pacific Asian Theology. He was a professor of a Seinan Gakuen University in Fukuoka, Japan for some 27 years. And he will you know, offer us some ending prayer. Thank you so much, Reverend Yagi.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. In Japanese, twinkle, twinkle is pika, pika. The roar of thunder in Japanese is dong. The bomb burst. The first thing they saw was a blinding flash of light. That they called twinkle, twinkle, pika, pika. The roar of thunder in Japanese is dong. The bomb burst, and the first thing they saw was a blinding flash of light. The heat melted bodies and bones. The light was so severe that it burned the silhouette of human beings onto the sidewalk. The heat melted 5 fingers into one claw of scar tissue. Then came the deafening thunder, dong, pika, then dong. So they called the atomic bomb Pika-dong. The nickname for atomic bomb in Hiroshima became Pika-dong. The US exploded the first atomic bomb in 1945. The Soviets followed in 1949. Then came China, Israel, India, Pakistan, and North Korea. The first American hydrogen bomb was 500 times the power of the Hiroshima bomb. The Soviets and China also developed their own hydrogen bombs. By 2006, the Soviets and the US together had stockpiled more than 100,000 atomic and hydrogen bombs. Could that be true? That's what my notes say. As President Kennedy said, mankind must put an end to war, or war will put an end to mankind. As American citizens, we cry for Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We cry also for the human race. We cry for all animal and vegetable life. We cry for our great planet Earth. May human beings never experience Pika-dong again. We pray for the victims of the triple disaster of Fukushima, earthquake, tidal wave, and the cracking of the nuclear reactor, leaking thousands of tons of dangerous radioactive water. For our children and children's children, may God, all Buddhas, and all Kami-sama have mercy on us all. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Yagi. So this officially concludes our program, but we have a treat, another music from Go. But before we go there, actually, there's Harvey Wasserman amongst us. And for what he's done over the years, I really cannot ignore him raising his hand and wanting to make his announcement. So Harvey, take it away.
Okay, I'll do this in 1 minute. What a beautiful gathering. Thank you all so much. I do want to inject the issue of the nuclear plant at Diablo Canyon. We do have a runoff in the governor's race, and the governor could order or even just ask PG&E for an inspection. Now, Diablo Unit 1 is extremely embrittled, incredibly dangerous, the most dangerous thing we face in the entire state of California. And we want that plant inspected. It will shut down for refueling in early October. There is absolutely no reason why Diablo Canyon should not be inspected. It's very cheap to do when the reactor is shut. And the governor could even just politely ask PG&E, which has burned down half of Northern California, to allow an independent crew to go in and look at Diablo Canyon to see the extent of the embrittlement. So this is a very easy thing to ask, and we really want Governor Newsom. Many of us signed a petition 2.5 years ago to ask him to do this, and he gave us a real non-response. So please keep Diablo on your mind. If you happen to run into the governor, remind him that he has this petition from us and that Diablo Canyon needs to be inspected when it shuts down in October. Thank you very much. It's a beautiful gathering. And no nukes, everybody. And I'll see you in Solartopia.
No nukes, everyone. Thank you so much. And keep Diablo and also San Onofre on your mind. Yeah, keep watching the what's happening there. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
One thing I want to say to everyone. So I always say my activism absolutely stand on the shoulders of giants like you. I have so much respect to not only speakers who gathered here, but to people who gathered here tonight. Thank you so much, and I love you all. And now let's listen to the music of Go, because he's just fabulous. So thank you so much, Go. Take it away.